Kia ora koutou. My name is Christine Leighton and I'm the Rector at St Andrew's College. This is a principal's role. It is a role that I have been in for the last 15 years. Prior to that, I was principal at St Hilda's Collegiate School, where I was for 9 years. I've been in education, teaching for the last 40 years. Just before I was introduced to ISL, I had taught in a number of schools across New Zealand, and I'd moved from being assistant principal at Nelson College for Girls down to being principal at St Hilda's Collegiate School in Dunedin. And I was actually in my 3rd year of principalship there, learning the ropes pretty quickly about leading an organisation. One of my staff members, actually the guidance counsellor, was a coach on the ISL program. She presented me with the opportunity to go to an ISL course. I think it would be fair to say that when I was setting off for the course at Millbrook, I felt absolutely terrified. I was very comfortable in educational settings, but I hadn't had the opportunity to do much professional learning amongst people who weren't teachers or focused on education. I was really excited about the opportunity of meeting people from different professions, different walks of life, and when I got there and met the rich diversity of people that I was with, I just found it really exciting, and the days that we had there passed by really, really quickly. I particularly enjoyed the fact that I was introduced to things like the 360-degree leadership profile, which was actually done, of course, before we arrived. I found that getting that feedback was a huge learning for me, and then being put in with a small group of people who I worked really closely with over a matter of days, and learning about the different strengths that we all bring to a team made us all out of our comfort zone at times and really challenged us, but also showed what you could do together as a team of people who are all very different but working towards a collective goal. I can recall being rather bemused that I was the only one in the group who had a particular profile, which was more the feeling intuition profile, whereas everybody else across the various groups had something that I thought might be more in tune to sort of leaders or CEOs in a business sense. I think that it gave me real confidence that it was okay to be different, and that in perhaps, I now know 20 years later and 23 years in a principal's role, that the way that I do my day job as a leader of a large school, actually that intuition plays a very big part of that. And I found that really inspiring and affirming over the years. I believe every day in a leadership role is different, and every day you are learning. And so you're constantly learning new things about yourself. You're constantly learning about new challenges. And it's just part of the normal rhythm of life. One of the most challenging things for me was that I was rector at St Andrew's at the time of the 2011 earthquakes. It's really interesting now how several people will say to me, gosh, that must have been a terrible time to be, or a really challenging time to be principal of a school. But I felt right from the start that I was really intrigued that in a time of crisis, I realised how much people need and want a leader. And so in a way, when I look back on it, I actually think it was one of the easier times to be a leader, because when you're trying to effect change in leadership when things are going well, people actually think leaders are just there to make their lives difficult. They don't realise why change is necessary. But when you're a leader in a time of crisis, people really need somebody who is going to make a decision, who's going to consult, but not too much. I must say, in a funny kind of way, I really valued and kind of enjoyed that role of leadership in that really sad and challenging situation, but it was a very, very fulfilling time for me personally. And of course that learning from the time of the earthquake became relevant again in the time of the last couple of years with the pandemic. And I guess the learning that I had from the earthquake is that confidence in times of uncertainty, that you don't have to know the answers, but if you have confidence in yourself, you're able to communicate clearly, which is obviously so essential in leadership, and give people confidence. I think that's something that I certainly learnt from those earthquake times. It's interesting to reflect upon the fact that the time of the COVID challenge was quite different than the earthquakes because obviously it was much more global. And I guess with the earthquakes, there was more of a sense of we are going to get through this, and you could make some decisions that were going to have an immediate effect. I felt a little bit more powerless during the time of COVID, because actually making a difference to what was actually happening to us was out of our control. But there were certainly some similarities with regards to just taking deep breaths, surrounding yourself with trusted people, using your networks to find people in similar positions so that you could actually gain strength and confidence from people who were going through the same thing as yourself. One of the things that you learn when you're in leadership for a long time is that change is constant, that you never know all the answers. And so the advice that I would give to somebody is make sure that you always have the energy for new learning. Make sure that you surround yourself with people who you trust, so that when you're having a difficult time, that you can actually share your moments of insecurity or your moments of self-doubt, which will always happen. But the most important thing is to be thirsty and hungry for new knowledge and for new learning and for new experiences. One of the things that I think will always surprise you as a leader is that there are all different types of people that you can learn from. And in my role, I often learn from our students. What I'm finding at the moment is that they are just being so incredibly quick to grasp new ideas. The world that they are heading into is one of challenge, but I just have such incredible faith in them because I see them as young leaders with so many different skills that I will never have because of the world that they are growing up in. And it gives me a lot of hope for the future. My advice to people in leadership is never judge who you can learn from. You can learn from everybody that you are surrounded with. What I really enjoyed about the ISL leadership course that I was on was the self-development and the self-reflection. And that was a point that I wanted to make, as I think the most valuable thing that we all have to learn is how to lead self. And if we're not honest about ourselves, we cannot make good leaders. It's through experience that you realize what you're actually good at in your job and what are the areas where you need to find somebody close to you who can do the things that you can't, so that you realize you must be part of a team. I think the wonderful thing about ISL is that you're forced in a way to take your open and vulnerable self into that space. And when you're a leader in your job, a lot of the time you're not actually allowed or able to present yourself as vulnerable. There are moments that you can. I suspect in a lot of positions, if you're too vulnerable, you won't survive very long as a leader. And so it's a real privilege to be able to work with a group of people where you are allowed and open to being vulnerable and learning about yourself in a really honest way. And I found ISL wonderful for that. When it came to managing other adults, having to facilitate change within a school context and have difficult conversations with parents, just those more difficult kinds of things. And then of course, leading on to become a strategic leader, those were skills that I did not know that I had. And because I did ISL at the beginning of my leadership journey in terms of being the leader of the leadership team, then getting that self-awareness at that time of my career was really, really useful. Interestingly, one of the things that I've always known of myself is that I do not like conflict. That wasn't a real problem when I was a classroom teacher, because fortunately I didn't have much conflict with the kids. But you know, as I moved into more senior leadership positions, conflict became inevitable. And so I did quite a bit of work on learning to manage challenging conversations and to manage myself, more about my inner feelings when I was in a conflict situation. It's about managing your self-talk that's going on in your head and just managing the actual emotion that is building up inside of you. I think some people have a lot more of that emotion than others. I think a lot of people just don't feel that emotional disturbance in a conflict situation. For me, it's been around learning about breathing, learning about calming that emotion, keeping your interaction with the person on an even keel, and keeping the conversation away from being personal and focusing on the situation at hand, really, and dealing with what is actually the problem rather than making it some kind of personal criticism. Here's me at 62 and I'm still learning about leadership, and I'm hoping that when I move into the next phase of my life, I'll be able to be a leader in the community in a different kind of way and have more to give to leadership in places that I've perhaps never experienced before. It's only when you look backwards that you actually realise what that opportunity has brought to you. I'll just support that with a whakatauki, which I really, really believe in. Ka mua, ka muri, which is I look backwards to move into the future. For me, that's really, really important. It's so important that you hang on to where you have come from to guide where you're going in the future. Overall, as I say, 20 years ago is quite a long time ago to remember a lot of detail, but when I do think about my ISL experience, it's something that, as I said, I feel extremely grateful for.